Okay.
Okay, now, thank you. Yeah, we can start.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Let me begin by welcoming all of you to this webinar on indigeneity. From the Center for Canadian Studies, we are organizing a series of webinars on indigeneity. And this is the third one of the series. This would be on Bodo studies today. And we are very fortunate to have Milan amongst us. And Milan has been instrumental in putting us in touch with experts from his community, both earlier during the translation workshop and now for this seminar, this webinar. I stand corrected. We have to get used to the term webinar. So I'm sorry about the inconvenience caused because of my device, but we'll straight away move on to the presentations. Our first speaker today would be Adaram Basumatari, who's an associate professor and head, Department of Bodo at Janata College, Kokrajhar. He has been actively associated with the Bodo Department Teachers Association since its inception in the year 2003 and is presently advisor of the association. A published author, he has 17 books to his credit, comprising diverse genres, and has worked extensively in the field of Bodo language and literary traditions. The practice that we follow is that we would reserve all comments and all questions till the end of the entire session. We'll have the presentations first. Over to you.
Discussion after that.
Absolutely. We'll have a discussion after the 4 presentations, and then it will be open to questions. Okay. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. I'm audible.
Hello. Yes, sir, you are.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are. Yes, Professor Basumatari.
Good afternoon to you, Madam, and my Sir O'Neill Bodo, and Madam Onjola De Marie, and my younger brother Olindo Bamho, and my nephew Milon webinar. So today I'm going to present one paper on Bodo literature, its background and development. So I would like to share just a minute. Sorry.
Professor Basumatari, I think you want to share a PowerPoint with us. Right now it's showing your entire screen actually.
Yeah.
So you would have to go to an application window for showing it. We cannot see your presentation right now. It's just showing the entire screen.
Wanted to share my screen with everybody.
Yeah.
I'm getting one problem.
Yes.
In this.
So
let me.
I think one of the ways you could do it is that you could just email us the PowerPoint and we can.
Let me read
we can take it.
My paper.
And Yeah, and
So,
if you want us, we can share the PowerPoint. If you email it to one of us, we can just share it here while you're speaking. It's not a problem. If that's something that you're comfortable with.
my lecture. So the language of the
Yes, please.
Bodos is known as the Bodo language. The language belongs to Bodo group. Yeah, this languages. Sir Edward Gate, a historian from England, has written a history, namely a history of Assam, 1905. He wrote, the Bodo dialects, though still spoken in Assam by more than 500,000 persons, are in their turn giving away to Aryan languages like Assamese and Bengali, and their complete disappearance is only a matter of time. The first half of the 20th century was a very crucial period survive their language and culture. By the time Gurudev Kalisanam Brahma had come forward for revival of their language and culture, Sotichandra Bosumotari, Rubnath Brahma, Madaram Brahma, Parsuram Brahma, Jalodhar Brahma, Ananda Musahari, Pramachandra Brahma, Ishanchandra Musahari, and so many more had shouldered some responsibilities to do for the revival of the Bodo language and literature. The Bodo literature before the origin of the written literature. Before the origin of the formal Bodo literature, there are periods of folk literature and missionary period. There are many folk literatures in Bodo language. There are prose narratives such as myths, legends, tales of different kinds of songs, associated with religious contexts, Kerai song, Garza song, Bedasi song, and others. Songs associated with rites pages such as Maria song, lullaby song, game songs, ballads, and proverbs and riddles. Some outlining examples of the missionary contributions towards the development of the Bodo literature are a collection of folk songs and rhymes, 1879 by J.D. Anderson, miscellaneous essays relating to Indian subjects, 1880 by Brian Houghton Hodgson, an outline of Kosari grammar, 1884 by Reverend Sidney Andal, a short grammar of the Mess or Bodo language, 1889 by Reverend L. Scrapshoot, the Kosaris, 1911 by Reverend Sidney Andal and others. Origin of the Bodo literature. The Bodo literature is divided into old and modern on the basis of formation of the Bodo Sahitya Sabha in the year 1952. The age of the Bodo literature has completed nearly a century since its inception in the year 1920. Through the publication of Patuna Baishagu Gidu by Prasanna Kumar Boro Kaklari from the present Golpara district of Assam. Bibar, the mouthpiece of the Boro Satra Sonmiloni, was regarded as the torch-bearer of the Bodo literature, which was circulated in manuscript form to its readers by the chief editor, Sotichandra Bosumotari. This magazine got published in the year 1924 and 25. The Bibar contributed a lot towards the germination and development of the Bodo literature. The period from 1919 to 1940 is regarded as the age of Bibar. Some memorable creations of this period are Pathunam Baishagu Gidu, Kontai Metai, Bibar, Boroni Gudi Sipsa Aros, Jan Toka, Athorki Hala, Sonani Mala, Alongbar, Nayok, Boroni Litum Bijab, and others. Glimpses of the old Bodo literature at a glance. The Bodo Psha U Ayan was the first book written and published by Bodo people in the year 1915, edited by Kongasran Kaklari from the present Golpara district of Assam. The Bodo literature was started with the formation of the Bodo Chhatra Sammiloni in 1920. Pathunam Beshagu Gidu, 1920, by Prasanna Kumar Bodo Kaklari was the ever first book of the creative Bodo literature. The poet Modaram Brahma is the recipient of the Padma Shri Award in the year 1988. During this period, poetical literature was produced more in number. Mysticism, romanticism, nature, love, patriotism, satirical, and social problems of the community, such as education, social awareness, moral teachings, were the major themes of the poetical literature. The Abari was the only one short story of the period written by Ishan Chandra Musahari. Dramas were translated from Bengali and Assamese jatras by Chotish Chandra Bosumotari, Darendra Bosumotari, and others. Anandaram Musahari and Pramod Chandra Brahma were the famous prose writers. Almost all the poetical creations were written in the traditional mode or techniques. Novel was not written during the period. Western dialect was used for these writings. There was flexibility in spelling system. Modern period of the Bodo literature. The year 1952 is the turning point and the milestone for the development of Bodo language and literature. The Bodo Sahitya Sabha was formed on 16 November of 1952 at Basugaon in the district of the then Golpara, Assam. The government of Assam has considered the demand of the Bodo Sahitya Sabha to introduce the Bodo medium in the schools of Assam from the year 1963. These two developments brought some significant changes to Bodo language and literature. The year 1952 is regarded as the beginning of the modern or new Bodo literature. More than those significant changes have also found to see in the creative writing, such as structure of the poetry and drama, thematic selection, style, use of symbol, and others. So Onil Bodo, one of my respected sir and co-presenter of today's webinar, Onil Kumar Bodo, he has said in his famous book, A History of the Bodo Literature, that young generation of Bodo poets started writing poetry of liberation, ethnic identity, and self-assertion. Till the 50s and 60s of the last century, the dominant themes in Bodo poetry were nature, love, and patriotism. The poets engaged themselves in verse writing and followed the old technique and rhetorical style. Continuous works of the Bodo Sahitya Sabha and the introduction of the medium have asserted a great impact to the development of the Bodo literature. The new era of the Bodo literature was started with the poetical creations Radab in the year 1958 by Somar Brahma Chaudhuri. His memorable poetry collections are Radab new venture in these poems by way of poetical structure, use of symbol, use of style, and selection of theme. The poet has applied new structural technique and used words which have the meaning more than literal meanings. In the poem Manabili, there are beautiful imagery of love and romance. There is outcry for liberalization of humanity in the poem Dausigaba Nagadeng An. Gadan Paisali, this is the drama written by Kumar Brahma in the year 1958. The dramatist has also applied new techniques of dramatic literature, which has clear distinction from the earlier plays written by playwrights of the old period. The plot of the play is derived from the problems occurred in the society of the dramatist. The theme of the play is religious and also suffering and repentance. Joining or published in 1962, but for me, it was published in 1967. It's the first novel of this language, which was written by Chittaranjan Musahari. There is the plot of love of two souls, which are separated each other and go mad because of the letter of the dead father of the male protagonist. The nature also takes a major role in both the theme and plot. Peimal Mijing is the anthology of the short story, which was published in the year 1970. There are 3 short stories in the book. This was written by Chittaranjan Musahari, the first novelist of the Bodo language. Objects have been taken active role in 2 stories, such as Pangni Nalekor Bipang and Kamanai Dairi. Till today, there are innumerable poets, novelists, and short story writers in Bodo. Creativity, talent have been seen in all these types of literary genres. There are so many prolific writers who have relentlessly dedicated their services towards the development of the literary creativities. There are names of some of the prolific and influential writers. Somar Burma Chaudhuri, Rajendra Kumar Brahma, Vishnu Jyoti Kosari, Anil Kumar Bodo, Anju, Dhoranishwar Wari, Surat Najari, Aurobindo Ujir, Urkhagora Brahma, Bihuram Bodo, and others. Amongst them, Rajendra Kumar Brahma is in the lead role, who brought great changes in Bodo poetical literature by the creation of Krang Gongshe Nango in 1975. Vishnu Jyoti Kosari, Surat Najari, Aurobindo Ujir, Anil Bodo, Urkhagora Brahma, and others have brought revolution among the young poets. They have become more conscious in using and selection of words, application of private symbols, themes, styles, and poetical structures. It is to say that they are the architects of modern Bodo poems. In the field of dramatic literature, the name of Kumar Brahma comes in the forefront. This Gadan Paisali is the beginning of both the modern drama and the new social setup of the Bodos. Names and their memorable dramatic literature are Kumar Brahma, Horbai Kamsi, Surat Najari, Sande Baudia, Manoranjan Lahari, Anari, Mongol Singh Hajwari, Zohalau Malu, and myself, Adaram Bosomatari, Nikauri Hangma. Prose narrative literature in Bodo has got its highest peak among other genres of literature. Though these literature were written much later than poetical and dramatic genre, they have got easy access to readers and writers. Amongst many novelists, the name of Manoranjan Lahari comes to the front, and others follow him on the basis of narrative technique, plot construction, thematic selection, and characterization. All of his novels have the trends of modern literary theory, such as feminism and psychological novels. Chittaranjan Musahari is the best-known novelist among the common readers. He has written more than 55 numbers of novels since he first wrote the Jojaini Or in 1962 or 1967. Vidyasagar Najari has also endless contribution towards the development of Bodo novel. His Birgasini Tungri is a unique creation. Nilkumar Brahma, Jonil Kumar Brahma, Govindo Bosumotari, Horibhushan Brahma, Nondeswar Boro, Nondeswar Daimari, myself, Adaram Bosomatari, are also are some of the major short story writers. Nilkamal Brahma has built up a huge platform for Bodo short story. He is the most gifted and talented Bodo short story writer. His artistic skill is found in his narrative style, use of language, character portrayal, thematic application, and use of time and situation. Horizon Brahmo is the finest satirist Bodo short story writer. Jonil Kumar Brahmo is superb in picturization of local issues and situations. All these writers have played magic with words and have created literature one after another. So the formation of the Bodo Sahitya Sabha and the introduction of the Bodo medium, and lastly, the inclusion into 8th schedule into Indian Constitution, along with the this recognition of Bodo as the state language in Assam are the main blessings toward the Bodo language and literature. So towards the last, may I thank to all our coordinator and joint coordinator, Dr. Roy and Chattopadhyay and Milan and my co-presenters and all participants. So I have concluded my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this insight into literature, because this is not something most of us know much about. It was an extremely enlightening presentation. And with that, we will move on to the next speaker. Devasthi, would you like to
Yes,
intervene?
just a little. Yeah, just a little. Professor
Yes.
Basumatari, you would need to stop presenting because there's a button called stop presenting. If you could please do that so that if speakers after you need to present anything, they may. There's an option which says stop presenting. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Sir.
Yes, with that, we move on to our next speaker, Professor Anjali Daimari, who's a professor in the Department of English, Guwahati University. Her interest areas are fiction, African writing in English, contemporary South Asian literature, life writing, translation studies, writings from India's Northeast, and Bodo life and literature. A prolific author with many noteworthy contributions to international journals and anthologies, her recent publication is a translation of Vishnu Prasad Rava's Bodo folktale, Mauriyaswaran Jwalao, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, into English as the Call of the Ferengadao, Select Writings of Vishnu Prasad Rava, edited by Madan Sharma et al. Katha Publications, Guwahati and Tezpur University, 2019. And in 2011, with Pranab Jyoti Narzari, has selected and translated a collection of Bodo short stories entitled Shagat. She has so far guided 7 scholars towards PhD degree and over 10 scholars towards MPhil degree. She has coordinated many international and national seminars. In 2018, she was the academic coordinator of the International Seminar on Contribution of British Administrators and Christian Missionaries towards the Development of Bodo Language and Literature, organized by Bodo Sahitya Sabha in collaboration with CIIL Mysore in association with CIIT Kokrajhar. She has been a visiting faculty at National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, offering a module on Introduction to Narratives from 2014 to 2020. She is currently the editor of English Forum, Journal of the Department of English, Guwahati University. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Professor Sucharita Chattopadhyay, for this elaborate introduction. Okay, I'm honored. And thank you for inviting me, Professor Debashri Dattarai, and also Professor Sucharita Chattopadhyay, and for giving me the space in this platform. I don't know whether I should be occupying this space with stalwarts like Professor Anil Bodo, because my initiation into Bodo literature is mostly through his works, through his history of Bodo, Bodo literature. So I'm a student of English literature, so it's mostly self-learned for me. I belong to the community, so it is my interest that has made me to look into some of the writings. And so I'm still at a very preliminary stage, I should say. A book of translation, which I did, of course, with the help of Pranab Narjari. On my own, it wouldn't have been possible. Okay, not to maybe I shouldn't be spending so much time, all right, on this, and straight away maybe go to what I will be talking about. So as I said, understanding that Professor Anil Bodo, Dr. Adaramba Somatari, and Olindra Brahmo will share the space with me in this webinar on Bodo studies today, I thought it proper to locate women's presence, or call it voice, in existing Bodo writings in terms of my own research so far in this area. That is why I have titled my presentation as such, and would refer to my own readings in my attempts to look at women's representation in a few writings. Of course, in a limited space of 12 minutes, you just have less time to look at only few works. Okay, so in the time that I have, I would briefly talk about two studies that I had taken in recent years. In the time that one on the legend of Thengpatri, and the other to look at witch hunting in the Bodo community. And in this context, I refer to two novels written on the subject by Monoranjan Lahari. Two novels is Daini and Hainamuli, which offer perspectives into the changes that have entered in the treatment of women as witches. I also look into the politics of naming women a witch and Daini. Here I want to first talk about an almost forgotten woman in history and of late, which has figured in the literary imagination. So the emerging interest in this legendary Bodo figure has culminated in rewriting this legend in the form of two novels. One in Bodo, which has already been mentioned by Adaranda, that is Birgosrini Thungri, which was published in 2004, translated into English as The Sword of Birgosri by Krishna Dulal Borua in 2012, and the other in Assamese, Thengpakri Tehsildar Tamar Torwal, published in 2009, written by Indira Goswami and translated into English in 2013 by Aruni Kashyap as The Bronze of Thengpakri, Bronze Sword of Thengpakri Tehsildar. So it is interesting to note that though this bit of history existed for a long time, it remained a part of the lore and was almost vanishing from people's memories. So, so in that sense, the legend of Thengpakri has so far remained silenced. The fact that in a male-dominated society, she was the first woman tax collector in entire India requires critical inquiry, and a re-evaluation of this legend becomes a necessity, I feel. Both the writers, in the introduction to their work, contend with women's marginalization in society over time, and therefore, by writing fiction based on this legend, seek to retrieve this woman from silences of history. Therefore, the choice to reconstruct the life of Thengpakri from the available historical as well as oral sources may be perceived as a significant intervention into the socio-political life of Assam. It is interesting to see how these two writers use the same legendary figure to create fiction in two different languages. A study of these two texts therefore offers rich sides of resistance and critical inquiry. The two writers use the same legend in their fiction to different ends, which opens up scope to engage in many issues. Goswami's attempt in her novel, that is the Assamese novel, is more in the lines of placing Thengpakri along with Mula Gabhuru, Fuleswari Kumori, and Konoklata Borua, who are known as history. The novel was written by Goswami at a time when Bodo movement was at its peak, demanding a separate state, and which also saw some success with the formation of Bodo autonomous districts. In many ways, Goswami's act of writing a novel based on an unknown Bodo woman who was a woman tax collector at the time when the Bodos as a community were seeking more autonomy and visibility serves the dual purpose of not only promoting a sense of pride in the community, but also bringing the margins to the center. So in the Bodo novel, Birgostri Thungri, too, we find that the action takes place in the Bijni kingdom, where Birgostri is revenue collector in one of the revenue circles. The location and context of the novel by Vidyasagar Narzari is also the same, and in this novel too, Thengpakre is a Tehsildar. However, in Vidyasagar Narzari's novel, centrality is given to the attack of the British by Jaulia Dewan with active support of Thengpakre, who remaining a Tehsildar goes against the British and the Bhutan king to establish a Mech kingdom. Whereas Goswami's novel ends with Thengpakre formally giving up her job as Tehsildar to join the freedom movement against the British, Narzari's novel ends with Birgostri fighting till the end and losing her life in the bullets of a soldier. So we have two different endings in the two novels. The flexible handling of history by two writers due to lack of historical evidence brings into light an interesting difference. Goswami writes her novel in Assamese, and in writing for this audience, she is in a way making an attempt to place Thengpakre as one of the women freedom fighters from Assam, who is unheard of. In a way, by giving detailed descriptions of a Bodo way of life, customs and traditions in the novel, she is in her capacity as a fiction writer, mediating an understanding between the two communities, the Bodos and the Assamese, who have a history of hostility, with the Bodos always feeling marginalized by the mainstream Assamese community. Now, she also uses certain Bodo mythological stories in the novel. She uses some popular anecdotes related to folk beliefs. She describes at length the dress, the dokhana that Thengpakre wears. And a good deal of focus is also given to the character of Thengpakre, because in this novel, Goswami is writing for an audience who is unfamiliar with this woman and her tribe. She's this, so in her role as Tehsildar, we see her riding on a horse with hat on her head and the riding breeches over her dokhana. And in this image of Thengpakre, Goswami combines the national as well as the local. In both the novels, the protagonist is the bearer of sword, but the circumstances which lead her to the possession of the sword is entirely different. I'm just going to skip that portion. Okay, but in the two novels, we find that the circumstances which lead to the possession of the sword is entirely different. Unlike Goswami, Narzari does not give this detailed description of Thengpakre or the community, as he is writing the novel in Bodo, where his readership is meant to be the Bodos. Her role is envisioned as a pathfinder to their community by leading her to establish a Mech kingdom, which is in similar tune with the Bodo struggle for autonomy. In the preface to the translation of his novel in English, Narzari writes that, and I quote, "The sole objective behind this book is to document the history of the legendary Mech woman and her sword, to immortalize the history of her valor to posterity," unquote. Interestingly, Goswami refers to Thengpakre as a Bodo woman and Narzari refers to her as Mech. This is a political significance, as the word Bodo and Mech have larger implications in the history of the Bodos. Whereas Bodo is a tribe within the larger Bodo Kachari group, Mech similarly is also a sub-tribe within this group. Narzari is referring to Birgostri as Mech is an encompassing term, bringing the Meches within the Bodo Kachari community. So if we look into the history of the Bodos, we see that they have always been the subject of representation by mostly colonial ethnographers. In the absence of any other account available on the Bodos during the pre-colonial and colonial times, the ethnographic accounts and mention of Bodos in the colonial history written by colonial writers very often continue to influence any understanding of Bodo history. Since Bodo tribal ethos are generally unwritten and unrecorded and largely oral, a history based on writing therefore becomes questionable. So such a history would be oblivious to larger social, cultural, and political matrices of the encounter. Now, Hall in this context says that, Europe is constantly speaking to us. So the legend of Thengpakri subverts that kind of a colonial representation, and therefore the importance of reading cultural texts like Goswami's and Nazareth. So in the next part of my paper, as I said, I'll talk about this is my take on witch hunting. Okay, so cases of witch hunting and witch killing in Assam are a testimony to the fact that witch belief is still prevalent, and that most often it is women who are identified as witches. In most cases, it is seen that the family, community, village all work together to isolate a woman who is identified as a witch. So in my studies on the subject, I had done, I think at least 2-3 articles have been published till now on witchcraft studies. So in my studies on the subject, I looked at individual narratives, I looked at fiction, I looked at media reports and personal interviews to see how witch beliefs operate in a particular tribal society, in this instance, the Bodos. So here I would refer to fiction written by Manoranjan Lahari. So both Hainamuli and Daini, these are the 2 novels that I'm referring to, have as their main concern social evils prevalent among the Boros. He brings to his works an acute observation, often based on lived experiences of the people, and the painful knowledge of the human suffering caused by witchcraft accusations. The writer clearly points to the fact that witchcraft is a way of imagining evil among the gullible people with no basis of rationality. By making the focus of 2 of his novels on these evil practices, he points out that witchcraft is an actual threat to society and to the psychology of individuals. He takes a hard look into the murky world infesting his community of dainas, ojhas, spells, counter spells, material great killings and all those things. Hainamule was published in 1985, and it is the second novel written by Manoranjan Lahari. This novel is based on a practice on witch hunting, the practice of feeding Hainamuli to bewitch someone in order to attract and profess love. Hainamuli is the medicine that is prepared by an ojha and given to anyone who seeks his or her help to win his love. Now, Hainamulis are usually prepared by women who were considered outcasts, and so people never looked at them with good eyes. The central trope in the novel is Hainamuli giving shape to the work and life to the characters, also leading the novel to its tragic end. Now, this next novel, Daini, was written in 2005. It is also a novel on dainas and ojhas. And though the subject is the same, the ending of the novel is suggestive of the criminality that punishment to dainas has taken shape. The thrust in this novel is how innocents like Burma are framed as dainas and under a one-sided and biased village pisar are gruesomely beaten to death. Both the novels serve as a social document, providing a telling commentary on the fractures that split and hurt the Bodo society. What emerges from the reading of Hainamoli and Daini is that there is a thin line of difference between the dainas and ojhas, and in actual practice, the line between magic and medicine is blurred. In both the texts, the women who are accused as dainas were practicing ojhas, but conveniently, the healers were intertwined with witchcraft accusations. Lahari, through his texts, through his novels, interrogates the processes whereby an innocent becomes the victim of age-old beliefs. The dainas and ojhas are seen as opposites, causing harm and causing good, respectively. The novelist questions these binaries in his two novels, showing very clearly that dainas are created by the people to rationalize happenings for which they have no answers. So the author transfers the evil associated with the daina to the act of killing dainas, which those who do fail to see. In both Hainamuli and Daini, the two women who are framed as Dainis are presented as ojhas who practice it to sustain their families, whereas Udli is an ojha who prepares Hainamuli. Dharma, within the novel, has only done good to the people through her practice. By portraying these women as ojhas turned Dainis, Lahari is in a way collapsing the binaries that these two words stand for among the Bodos, suggesting that evil associated with dainas is unfounded because dainas are non-existent and constructs for people's convenience. I'm just going to conclude. The conclusions of the two novels are different, pointing towards the growing animosity against Dainas and the large-scale killings that follows. Udli in Hainamuli, once she is identified as a Daina, is boycotted from the village and she dies a natural death. In Daini, the next novel, Durma's punishment is much harsher and she is mutilated till her last breath. Besides, the punishment is extended to her family as well, which of course the novelist does not let it happen. Orong in Daina seems to be the voice of the novelist who, as an educated youth, says the inhumanity of witch killings on false charges. Finally, though left unsaid, we realize who would have reported to the police about the heinous crime, and within the text, justice is done as the culprits are arrested and charged for murder. I end with this. So this was my presentation, one on the legend of Thengpakri and other on the representation of the witch, in two texts by Monoranjan Lahari.
Thank you so much. This was again a very, very interesting presentation because we really know very little about this part of literature which is produced in India, in another part of India, not that far away from us also. So with that, we move on to Professor Anil Bodo, who's currently the professor and head of the Folklore Research Department and director in charge, Center for Performing Arts at Guwahati University. He received his MPhil and PhD degrees from Guwahati University. He has published more than 20 books on folklore and Bodo literature, poetry, travelogue, including book of criticism such as the history of Bodo literature, folk literature of the Bodos, the flute and the harp, Delphi and other poems, among others. He has also edited many books for Sahitya Academy, including folk Bodo, folk, Sangeet, or Kavita in Bodo. He has been member of professional bodies like the International Society for Folk Narrative Research, Indian Folklore Congress. He is executive member and convener of the Bodo Advisory Board for Sahitya Academy. A versatile writer, he has traveled to many countries like Greece, Denmark, China, Thailand, Nepal, Bhutan, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Portugal for attending folklore conferences and writers' delegation. Over to you, Professor Bodo.
Thank you. So we are here in this webinar on this topic of locating indigeneity and rearticulating resilience with reference to Bodo language, literature, and culture. And I have chosen to speak on Bodo culture with reference to the issues of indigeneity and rearticulating resilience. So before we go into the topic, we should know who are the Bodos and what's their culture. The Bodos are one of the original or aboriginal inhabitants of the state of Assam and the largest tribal community of the state of Assam. And they are spread in different districts of Assam, and they're also spread in other states of Northeast India like Meghalaya, like Nagaland, and then they're also spread in parts of West Bengal, parts of Nepal, and also parts of Bangladesh. So they are widely spread. And this is found in the writings of S.K. Chatterjee and others. S.K. Chatterjee has emphasized this point about the widespread distribution of the Bodo population. He says, the Bodos who spread over the whole of the Brahmaputra Valley and North Bengal as well as East Bengal, forming a solid block in northeastern India, were the most important Indo-Mongoloid people. He has said that the Bodos are the most important Indo-Mongoloid people in eastern India. So they're in the Mongoloid connection because they belong to the Mongoloid race. So their language is one important branch of Tibeto-Burman family of languages on which Olin Brahmo will be speaking. So during this different epochs in the history of Eastern India or Northeast India, the Bodos have gone through different processes of cultural assimilation, the process of assimilation and fusion, as a result of which, maybe because of these, the process of colonization, or you can explain it in so many different languages. So they almost lost their identity through the ages. But in spite of all this, the Bodo people have been able to maintain, they have been able to maintain their language, they have been maintain their culture through the ages. And I had given elaborate account on how the Bodo people have been explained in different texts, Sanskrit and Assamese texts like Jajur Bedo, Atharva Bedo, Ramayana, and this is from the sources, references given by different scholars. So I won't go into this. The Bodos, although one of the aboriginal and indigenous tribes of Assam, they were mostly an oral society, as Anjali said earlier. They didn't have writing culture before 100 years back, almost 100 years back, because their first book was published in the year 1915, the year 1915. Before that, only some works were published on their language, on Bodo grammar, and some ethnographs and missionary accounts were there before that. So the Bodos are basically an oral society because they didn't have their own script and writing because of this, the different historical processes. The process of colonization, and then they were in the pre-colonial and colonial times of colonial, pre-colonial operations and suppressions. So these things apart, in spite of all these things, as I have said, they have been able to maintain their language and identity through the ages. And coming to the point of indigeneity, the words like indigenous or aboriginal are very commonly used to denote the tribal groups who are rooted to the soil, who are the original inhabitant of a particular territory or political geographical region. And indigeneity means the quality of being indigenous, being a member of an indigenous group. It refers to someone who is a native, born or produced naturally to a place, a region, a geography. Since 1972, the idea has emerged in various discussions and debates in the forum of the UN Working Group for Indigenous People. Some think that the idea of indigeneity is a political construct. This is evident from the quote below. Indigenous is a term applied to the people and by the people to themselves who are engaged in often desperate struggle for political rights. So this is invariably linked with the establishment of political rights of some people who feel that they are being ousted, they are being marginalized, they're becoming a minority in their own place. And this issue is very, very critical and crucial in this land called Assam, this province called Assam, and entire Northeast India. So it's a very pertinent topic we are present here. So now I come to indigeneity with reference to Bodo culture. The Bodos are one of the aboriginal and indigenous tribes, as I already mentioned. And these indigenous people, they have been able to maintain their identity by preserving their indigenous, preserving their traditional religion, which is called Batu religion, which is current among them since time immemorial, and it is invariably linked up with the worship of Batu, the supreme god of the Bodos. And it has come after the name of Batu Brai, Bato means the 5 principles of creation. It is the 5 principles of creation which must be followed by every devout member of the race. So this is based on the principle of 5. So number 5 is very, very important in Bato religion. But this kind of traditional worship of the Bato is identified as animism by the colonial writers, by the missionary writers, and even the mainstream writers in India, even the anthropologists. And coming to the other aspects, other domains of Bodo culture, we see that the Bodo culture is part and parcel of Indo-Mongoloid or Kirato culture. Writers like Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, as I have already mentioned, writers like Suniti Kumar Chatterjee and others have identified Bodo culture as part and parcel of the Mongoloid culture because it is the culture of the indigenous people. It is the culture of the Aboriginal people of Eastern India. They have, almost established the view that the Mongoloid Bodo culture, as the culture of the indigenous people, has influenced the Aryan culture of this region, this Assam region. It has influenced even the Aryan culture. And in his monograph on the Au-Naga tribes, W.C. Smith has demarcated 13 outstanding features of Mongoloid culture, and of these 13 characteristic features, there are five characteristic features which we find among the Bodos also as an indigenous community and their culture. These are the habit of battle swing. First is the habit of battle swing, which is very common to the people of Northeast India, even Southeast Asia, the Mongoloid people. It is the habit of battle. This is a raw arkanat. So second is the aversion to milk as an article of food. And third is the use of simple loom for weaving cloth. The fourth characteristic feature of Indo-Mongoloid culture, according to W.C. Smith, is the habit of using large type of shield in the warfare. And fifth characteristic feature is the chance of residence in isolated regions in a crude form of agriculture. It is the crude form of agriculture, which is common to all the tribal people of Northeast India, and they keep on shifting their habitats in search of fertile land for cultivation. And the Bodos had this habit because in their novels also we have this thing very common. They are migratory in nature. They keep shifting their habitat in search of fertile land. So this is what W.C. Smith said about the Mongoloid culture, and about these are the 5 characteristic features which find in common among the Bodos also. And other aspects of their culture we see in their use of the bamboo for so many different purposes, like house building and making very handicraft items, craft items, even the household utensils, for use for cultivations, and utensils, weapons and utensils used for fishing and hunting and so on, and even furniture. And then the intricate use of color and designs in weaving and textile. This is an important characteristic feature. And the indigenous people of the region, among the indigenous people of the region, we see it is not the men folk, but the women folk who are engaged in weaving and textile. It is not men folk, but women folk. It is the women's job. This is the specificity of the tribes of this region, including the Bodos. And we see the rhythmic and colorful dances like the Bagrumba, then Bardesikla, then Beishagu Masanai, Tausidalai Musanai, and 18 varieties of Karai dances. And they have the folk theatrical forms. Jatra Gan, Adaram Bosumtari mentioned about the Jatra Gan of the Bodos. And besides it, there were forms like Takrifala, Kamtafala, and Langnam Gan, this is the Jatra Gan, and Actingia Gan. These are different forms, performing forms. And now new entertaining forms have come off. And they also observe some seasonal agricultural festivals like the Baishagu. I'll speak something more about this in the next point. This is articulation of resilience through culture. How, as an indigenous community, how an indigenous tribal group of the eastern part of India, northeastern part of India, they are trying to bring different aspects, different domains, different elements of their culture in a new way. In a new way, and let's see. We are going to see how the loss and threats to identity of the tribe leads to the counter process of rearticulation of resilience in the fields of traditional culture. Besides, of course, language. Language is also one of the important elements in this. This is evident in the fields of religious culture. I would like to begin with the religious culture of the Bodos. I have already mentioned about the Bodo religion, and it begins with centers around with that Bodo religion. We all know about the adoption of Brahmo religion. Brahmo religion, religious cult by a section of the Bodos under the leadership of Kadeshan Brahmo in the second decade of the 20th century. The Brahmo sect, as preached by Gurudev Kadeshan Brahmo, tried to reform the Bodo society by adopting Vedic Hindu practices like Yajnahuti and the worship of the original Hindu gods and goddesses, and the total avoidance of the use of as all superstitious practices in all the Bodo rituals. And the other section of the majority Bodos still followed their traditional Bodo religion. But later in the 1990s of the last century, from 1990s, the last century, they adopted large-scale reforms by doing away with some practices like animal sacrifice and the primitive kind of rituals, primitive kind of worships, which is research taught in the Kerai Puja by offering some sacrifice and offering rice beer and other so many items. And these and many other moves towards reformation came as a rearticulation of resilience. Many Bodo gods and goddesses were shown as identical to Hindu gods and goddesses. For example, the Bodo Shiv god Batu Brai or Borai Batu is presented as identical to Lord Shiva. This kind of parallelism you'll see in the pantheism of the Bodos. They are shown as parallel to the Hindu gods and goddesses. These and many other moves towards reformation came as rearticulation of resilience, and many Bodo gods and goddesses were shown as identical and similar to Hindu gods and goddesses. And many Hindu rituals and festivals are now being observed by the Bodos as a result. And the same articulation of resilience can be seen in other fields of Bodo culture. We see the rhythmic and colorful dances I have already mentioned. The dances like the Bagrumba, then dances like Bardesikla, and other dance forms. As the traditional and all forms of performances, theatrical performances are gradually dying out nowadays, the young artists among the community are now coming up with historical and social Bodo plays with cultural contents and relevance. And some mobile theater groups are also trying to revive the theatrical performance tradition and the new entertainment forms promoted by the mass media and new media have had adverse impact on them. However, the audiovisual and popular culture tend to fill the void. Bodo films, stage plays, video and music CDs are now being uploaded and circulated in the virtual space through YouTube, the blogs, and social media sites. And till today, the Bodos observe some seasonal agricultural and religious festivals, but with some change, with some reformations. For example, the Baisagu festival is the main seasonal festival, seasonal agricultural festival of the Bodos, and it is now being celebrated as the national festival of the Bodos, like the Assamese Bihu. But this Baisagu is ethnic specific to the Bodos. It is very similar to the Bihu, but it is observed. It is celebrated in a different way. It is an ethnic specific to the Bodos. So the feasting, dancing, merrymaking, these things are also there. And then a new thing has come up. Along with the Kerai and Garza, which is part of the traditional Bodo religion, we see the Batu festival, a new form of a reform Batu festival is coming up now as a resurgent religious festival as articulation of religions, resilience, and now Batu Puja and Batu Mela. Along with Puja, there is Mela. It has come up as festival. Now Batu Puja and Mela are held in various places with religious rituals, performances, and other activities. And interestingly, these Puja and Mela are organized simultaneously with some Hindu festivals, simultaneously at the time of some local festivals. This is mostly done in order to attract the Bodo people to their traditional religion. And now we see the Batu followers, the followers of the Batu religion are demanding Batu religion to get recognized as their indigenous religion like other organized religions like Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and so on. And we also see the process of rearticulation of resilience in the domain of material culture, covering the textile items and ethnic dress used by the women folk, the colorful dress, design, decorated dress like Dohona, Aronai, and Fasra, and also the dress owned by the male folk also, and also different art and craft items. And secondly, Bodo ethnic food and beverages. And also in musical instruments, Bodo musical instruments, because these are instrumental in preserving the Bodo culture, Bodo music, Bodo musical performances, even their traditional religion. These are musical instruments like the kham, it is the big drum, and the serja. In Eastern India, we have a musical instrument like sarinda, in Nepal also. But this is the Bodo musical instrument, which is called serja, and the Bodo flute, sifung, which is not present in other communities. It's a very long flute, only with 5 holes. Because number 5 is very, very significant in Bodo traditional religion. And this number 5 is also part of this Bodo pentatonic music. So these things are there. Maybe the experts would be able to explain these things better. And then the fourth characteristic feature of Bodo material culture is the Bodo house type, its architecture, outer and inner house decoration and furniture. And finally, I'm coming to the end. Besides the fields mentioned above, there are other domains where rearticulation of resilience can be seen. These are which we can see in other tribal communities, other indigenous communities of this part of India. This is ethnic identity and the cultural gatherings and ethnic festivals. Cultural gatherings and ethnic festivals are invariably linked up with these ethnic identity movements, ethnicity movements. Then community gatherings, community meetings and conferences of different Bodo organizations, where we have these cultural processions, these musical performances, these theatrical performances. They will invite some popular artists, folk artists to perform. Even the government are also organizing some now festivals. We see folk festivals, music festivals, dance festivals. Then marriage functions and ceremonies, where Bodo ethnic dress is used compulsorily. The use of Bodo ethnic dress, which has become a very important characteristic feature of the present times. So, in recent years, the Bodo student organization, the APSU, and the religious union, the Bato Religious Union or Bato Mahakabha, they have introduced a new dress code. When you go for this ritual, Bato ritual, when you go for celebration of the Baisagu festival, when you go for a Bodo conference, you have to, the members have to use the uniform, which is not this kind of Western trousers we wear, but it is a traditional kind of Bodo gamsa, traditional kind of Bodo jumgra, and traditional kind of Bodo jacket. So these things have come. A specific kind of dress code has come, and this is found compulsory in public functions, celebrations, and even the members of the marriage party. And all these and other activities in recent years reveal how rearticulation of resilience is at work in all and every fields of Bodo culture. Like the other major tribal groups in Northeast India, the Bodos have high literacy rate now and are more advanced than the tribes in other states in the rest of India. The advent of writing culture that came very late, that means 100 years back, 100 years ago to them, it has opened the doors for documentation of oral songs, tales, myths, religious chants, proverbs, sayings. But still, many things remain to be done. As a process of articulation of resilience, many old traditions are being revived and revitalized now. And some innovations, as I have already given some examples, some illustrations, some innovations are being introduced to keep pace with the changing currents of time. Here we see culture not just as a way of life, not just a way of the community's life, their experience, their doings and their behavior, but as a process of meaning making, as a way of contest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Bodo. Now we move on to the last speaker of the day. Alindra Brahma is a lecturer cum junior research officer, Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, and officer in charge, Center for Northeastern Language Development, CIIL. His areas of interest are corpus linguistics, Northeast Indian languages and linguistics, phonology, morphology and syntax, lexicography, translation, science fiction stories, folklore and literature. A prolific writer, he is the author of Modern Bodo Grammar 2013 and Thapsi, a science fiction in Bodo, and has also authored books on communicative Bodo and phonetic Bodo. Over to you. Alindra Brahma, please.
Professor Brahma, you're on mute, so if you could please unmute yourself. Yeah. Thank you. We can't still hear you, sir. You are back on mute, sir.
He is still unmute. Mute, still mute.
Yeah, it's still mute, sir. Could you please unmute?
Yeah, he has unmuted himself.
No, yeah.
But we can't hear anything.
Professor Brahma, we can't hear anything. Could you please see?
He's unmute, but he can't be heard.
Hello.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry for inconvenience. Actually, I changed my device actually.
It's
So
okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
So respected moderator, Professor Chattopadhyay, and respected discussion, Professor Dattarai and Mr. Milan Nazari from the Organizing Institute, Center for Canadian Studies, Jadavpur University, Kolkata. Thank you so much for inviting me as one of the speakers in this webinar. On behalf of the Bodo community, I sincerely thank you all for organizing such an important webinar on the community. Respected speakers, Professor Onil Boro, Professor Anjali Daimari, and Professor Adaram Bosumatari, Kulumbai. All the esteemed participants, Namaskar. My tentative topic was resilience of Bodo, a Doan to a language. And I'm going to speak on it with references to work on Bodo starting from Kempil. The main focus will be on the formation of words in the language. Now let me start with an introduction to the Bodo based on several linguistic aspects of it. Bodo people are known as Bodo, Plains Kosari and Bodo Kosari in Assam, Mes or Mech in West Bengal, and Meche or Mesi in Nepal, but their language is known as Bodo. The differently spelled words B-O-R-O and B-A-R-O are also used, but as surnames of some of the Bodo people, like Onil Boro. Bodo as a language comes under the group Bodo-Garo under Tibeto-Burman subfamily of Sino-Tibetan languages, based on Grierson's classification of languages in his Linguistic Survey of India, Volume 1, Part 1. Bodo is spoken by 8,99,907 in Bodoland territorial area districts, Kokrajhar, Chirang, Baksa, and Odalguri. It is spoken by 14,16,125 in Assam, 42,739 people in West Bengal, 7,372 in Nagaland, 7,095 in Arunachal Pradesh, 4,879 in Meghalaya, 511 in Tripura, 203 in Mizoram, 174 in Manipur, and 65 in Sikkim, according to Census of India 2011, Government of India. Thus, there are 14,82,929 speakers of Bodo in the country. It is also spoken in Nepal. According to the 2001 census published in Statistical Pocket Book Nepal in 2002, the total number of population of the people is 3,763, and the number of speakers is 3,301. There was a time when the Bodo language was called Doan, which means Patwa, by the mainstream around the Bodos, as there was no written form of the language. On the other hand, the prediction of a British administrator, Sir Edward Gate, in his book A History of Assam, published in 1906, that the extinction of the Bodo community was just a matter of time, was a threat, obviously a positive threat for the Boros. Around this time, Gurudev Kalisaran Brahma, a socio-political religious leader, started mobilizing Bodo people to reclaim the ethnic and linguistic identity. Thus, in 1928-29, a Bodo delegation led by Brahma submitted a memorandum to the visiting Simon Commission demanding a Bodo regiment in the British Indian Army, reservation of seats in Assam's provincial council and local bodies, and the right of Boros to enlist separately as Bodo in the electoral roll and census. Thus, we can get record of social, religious reforms and literary movements with different names like Bibar in 1920s, Olongbar in 1930s, Bodo Saitya Sabha, which started in 1950s, then Roman script movement in 1974-75, the political movement from 1980s through 2020. To start with, the contribution of Christian missionaries, British administrators and anthropologists towards the resilience of Bodo language, we can start our discussion chronologically at Dr. Archibald Campbell. The first known work done on the maize dialect of Bodo, spoken in and around easternmost area of Nepal and Darjeeling, is by Campbell. In his article, Note on the Message, together with a small vocabulary of the language in the Journal of the Asiatic Society, published in August 1839, there is a collection of around 250 lexical items in his work, where he presents several examples of formation of feminine and masculine using je and jela suffixes respectively. For example, masu je, cow, and masu jela, bull. However, he said, I regret that I have not yet had an opportunity of meeting a person intelligent enough sorry, I don't have electricity now, so I'm just switching on my mobile torch. Yeah. There is a collection of vocabulary, around 250 lexical items in his work, where he presents several examples of formation of feminine and masculine using ze and jela suffixes respectively. However, he said, I regret that I have not as yet had an opportunity of meeting a person intelligent enough to give me some idea of the construction of the language. This must remain for further inquiry. Another important work on the language is the book Essay the First on Coats, Bodo, and Dimal tribes, published in 1847 by Hodgson. As per the records available until now, he used the Bodo term for the first time in his book. In his book, he said, for maize, read Bodo, Pasim. Maize is a name imposed by strangers. The people call themselves Bodo, which of course is the proper designation. Again, in his book, Hodgson also discusses about the formation of masculine and feminine in Bodo. And then he discusses about the formation of passive verb in Bodo. According to him, passive verbs are formed by means of the perfect auxiliary verb to be zane, added to the root of the primary, which root is imperative, second person singular. He discusses more about inflection in the grammar part of the book. Another grammar book on the Bodo language is Outline Grammar of the Kosari Bodo Language, as spoken in District Dorong, Assam, by Sidney Endel, which is published in 1884. In his preface to the book, he discusses about the formation of proper names of rivers and places. He said, and there is a reason to think that the Kosaris were at one time the dominant race, or at least one of the dominant races in the Brahmaputra Valley, and as such, they seem to have left traces of their language in the names of some of the most prominent physical features of the country. Thus, the names of many of the principal rivers of Assam begin with the syllable D, which is perhaps the Kosari word for dai, for water. For example, Dihong, Dibong, Dibru, Dihing, Disang, Dikhu, Disoy, Diju, etc. Uh, and river town like Dimapur, old Kasari capital of on the Dhonsri River. This particular prefix D or dai is constructed out of the word dai, which is river, which is used as a categorical prefix to form words related to water. For example, daisu, which means watery in taste, then daisrang, transparent like water, dailau, liquid like water, etc. Again, in the preface to this book, Endel also gives example about how words are changed through elision. For example, from gaham to gham and ham. In this online grammar, outline grammar, Endel has discussed about accidents. Uh, it means inflection under 6 heads, namely noun, adjective, pronouns, verbs, and other inclinable words such as preposition, conjunctions, and interjections. While starting with inflection of nouns, he also discusses about the formation of masculine and feminine. His discussion about it in more detail than his discussion about it is more detailed than Campbell and Hodgson. He also very clearly uh, the different shows the different masculine and feminine forms of humans. For example, Hawa, male and Hinjao, female, goats and deers, Hanta and Hanti, male and female respectively, hawks, Bunda, male and Bundi, female, for birds, Zilla, male and Z, female, and for elephant, Makunda, male, Makundi, female. However, his analysis and discussion mainly are on inflectional categories of the lexicon. Um, Endel discusses about formation of passive verbs in Bodo using past participle form of the word followed by za, which means be. For example, ang nunai zabai. It means I was seen. But this does not seem to be a correct analysis anyway. Another important analysis by him is the formation of negative verbs in Bodo by adding an affix which he calls a negative adverb. Though he has presented correct data of formation of imperative and indefinite negative verbs, his analysis and discussion are not clear. Again, he discusses about the most important and challenging part of the word formation in Bodo, which is the formation of causative verbs through prefixes, use of prefixes. He has presented several examples of Bodo uh, of both the suffixation and prefixation sub-processes of deriving causative verbs, but it needs more detailed analysis about it. He also discusses about the set of suffixes that derive completive verbs, which are termed as adverbial suffixes by Robbins Barling. For example, my hakangbai. She has finished cutting his or her paddy. He also discusses about borrowing with examples like Kanthal, Zek tree from Assamese, Kothal, Thaka, Rupee from Bengali Taka. Another work by Endel is the monograph The Kasaris in 1911, where he gives a short description about the Bodo language. Again, in this monograph, he discusses about the formation of masculine and feminine terms, as he discusses in the outline grammar, 1884. Then he discusses about the formation of adjectives using go vowel prefix, for example, gaham, gusum, which means respectively good and black, and are derived from ham and sum. verbs. The most interesting word formation processes Endel has analyzed and discussed is in the appendix 1 of the monograph, which is the formation of surname of Boros. For example, Mesa Aroi, now Mosahari, the tiger folk. Duim Aroi, now Doimari, the water folk. Uh, Goibar Aroi, now Goyari, the Betelnut folk. Sorg Aroi, the Sorgari, now Sorgari, the heaven folk. Sir George Abraham Grierson in 1903, while discussing about the Bodo grammar, starts with a sentence, all the dialects of borrow words freely from Aryan languages, Bengali or Assamese, with which they are brought in immediate contact. All of Endel, Grierson, and Anderson have claimed that borrowing has been a regular phenomenon in the formation of words in Bodo. According to Anderson, as cited in Grierson, the Bodo people use Bengali or Assamese, as the case may be, as easily as their own tongue. This has necessarily affected the use of the Bodo language, as indeed it has probably affected Assamese and has perhaps introduced some of the linguistic peculiarities which differentiate it from Bengali. It has become possible to use Kosari words almost as if they were Assamese words. However, Grierson in 1903 has discussed about the agglutinative nature of the Bodo language to form compound verbs which a good number of example such as man, dang. Man means get, dang means touch, and together they become mandang, which means fill. There are more examples. Anyway, I'm just skipping the examples. If we go through these examples, we can find out a formation of serialized verbs, formation of causative verbs, formation of passive verbs, formation of distal verbs, formation of adverbial verbs, etc. in the language. Grierson has also analyzed and discussed the skeleton grammar of Garo, Tripuri, Kokborok, Rabha, and Dimasa languages. Let's now brief about the work on the language by native grammarians. Komal Kumar Brahmo is the pioneer of writing Bodo grammar in Bodo. His grammar Ganang Rao Khanti, which means important grammar, first published in 1972, plays an important role in teaching grammar to the Bodo medium students. Bodo as a medium of instruction started on 18th May 1963 in lower primary schools. Though he wrote this grammar with the help of grammar translation method from Sanskrit, Bengali, and Assamese grammars, his grammar covers a few word formation processes such as words of derivative sense, derived words of specialized sense, compound words of specialized sense. As the example of word of derived sense, he has given examples such as Deihu, which means pitcher, Hathor, which means soil stone, Danserang, which means full moon night. In the category of derived words of specialized sense, he has given the example of root words. And the category of compound words of specialized sense, he has taken the examples like Deikhor, which means well, Maidet, which means elephant, etc. The other type of word formation Brahmo has presented in his book is collectively about addition of adverbial suffixes with verbs, formation of causative verbs, formation of complex words, etc. However, his classification of word formation processes in Bodo is not that clear to come into a conclusion. He also discussed about almost, if not all, the inflectional morphology and a little about the Bodo syntax. One of his remarkable work is A Hankani name. This is the rule of the letter A. Here he discusses about the occurrences of the different allomorphs of the suffix A, which is one of the most important and controversial part of the Bodo spelling system. Then Modaram Bodo, in his The historical development of Bodo language, published in 1990, discussed about formation of different categories of words with the heading constructed words. He has presented uh, 10 different examples without mentioning the types of word formation processes and without explaining them. Anyway, these examples show the word formation in Bodo through prefixation and categorical prefixes. Uh, Go vowel prefix and pronominal prefixes in formation of kinship terms. The other processes of word formation he has mentioned with explanation are borrowing and phonological processes. In borrowing, he gives example of borrowed and constructed words from Dimasa, Sanskrit, Assamese, Bengali, Hindi, Thai, Ahom, Khasi, Kolmunda, Malay, English, French, Portuguese, Persian, Arabic, and Turkish. The phonological processes he has discussed are diphthongization, aspiration, de-aspiration, assimilation, vowel harmony, metathesis, epenthesis, and umlaut. Though he has discussed phonological processes in very brief, it helps in investigating the phonological aspects of word formation processes in Bodo. Bodo, in his another book, Structure of Bodo Language, published in the same year, 1990, again discusses about word formation processes in Bodo, such as formation of kinship terms, affixation of categorical prefixes and suffixes, formation of compound and complex words. Two other very important processes he has discussed are avabramsa, this is corruption, and hybrid. Then Sarnaprava Sainari in 2006 discusses about formation of Bodo nouns from other nouns and verbs in terms of prefixation, suffixation, and compounding in his book Bodo Raukanti, which means Bodo grammar. There is a very vast scope to discuss about different kinds of word formation with the help of this example. The example she has given in her book, such as noun incorporation in formation of categorical prefixes that co-occur with different bound roots to form plant names, animal names, bird names, fish names, etc. Again, there is a wide scope of to discuss the formation of different kinds of nouns such as gerunds, compound nouns, deverbal nouns, etc. Olindra Brahma, in his book Modern Bodo Grammar 2013, analyzes and discusses about different word formation processes such as derivation of adverbs and deverbal nouns, compounding, reduplication, conversion, etc. Again, in the category of derived nouns, he discusses about the formation of kinship terms, formation of nouns from other nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Another important typological word formation processes in Bodo has been discussed by Brahma, which is word formation through affixation of categorical prefixes. Then he discussed about the formation of compound nouns. He also discussed about the formation of complex verbs in terms of semantic conditioning and yeah. He has categorized the causative prefixes for vowel prefix, bo vowel prefix, and so vowel prefix in terms of semantic conditioning, and discussed about the 18 elements of these causative prefixes in terms of vowel harmony and consonant assimilation. He has also discussed about several different kinds of formation of causative verbs. Then we can see the work of Daimalu Brahmo in his word formation processes in Bodo affixation, published in 2017, where he discussed the word formation processes in Bodo in terms of affixation. He has presented bulk data of causative verbs, negative imperative verbs, different kinds of adjectives, kinship, and other kind of nouns, classifiers, passive verbs, permissive verbs, and other kinds of verbs. He has given more and more space to inflectional morphology than derivational, though he has discussed about the word formation in his book. There are also several Indian linguists who worked on the language. As one of them, we must take at least the name of Pramod Chandra Bhattacharya, who remains the pioneer of studying the Bodo language in a scientific way. His work, a descriptive analysis of the Bodo language, published in a book form in 1977, has been considered to be the Bible of the Bodo language by the community. He discusses about the different levels, especially phonology, morphology, and syntax in a very detailed way. While discussing about the formation of nouns, he mentions the personal prefixes of in forming kinship terms. For example, apa, my father; nampa, your father; bifa, his or her father, etc. Uh, then he discusses about group prefixes such as ma, vowel prefix such as they, no, thou, thai, etc., which form class nouns. For example, no plus ma, noma, that is main house of the Boros. Mai, which means animal, plus der, which means big, maider, this is elephant. Then he discusses about the formation of Boro adjectives through prefixation of uh, go vowel prefix. He also points out four different dialects of the Boro language, which are the Northwest dialect, the Southwest dialect, the North Central Assam dialect, and the South Assam dialect. Foreign linguists such as Robbins Burling and Scott Lancy, they have also worked on the language as one of the Tibeto-Burman or Borogaro languages. One of the linguists in this category is none other than Professor Kazuyuki Kiryu of Mimasaka University, Japan, who has been fascinated with the numeral classifiers, which usually classify nouns in real sense, used in the Bodo language. Is an outline of the Meso language, grammar, text, and glossary published in 2008 is a very good description about the language. As he has been fascinated with the numeral classifiers, uh, 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 there are so much typological areas in the language to work on, such as high vowel devoicing, use of sesquisyllables, causative prefixes, allophonic uses of stops, free variation, formation of categorical prefixes, etc. Anyway, there are also so many scholars, grammarians, linguists who worked on the language and still working. But in this very short period of time, it is not that possible to take their names and discuss their noble work. Thus, in different points of the rigorous development of the language, it has been promoted to be included in the list of scheduled languages of India. Apart from its implementation in higher education, now it can be learned as a second language by a non-native speaker availing stipend and hostel facilities in Northeastern Regional Language Center, Guwahati, which is one of the 7 regional language centers of Central Institute of Indian Languages, Ministry of Education. Again, different literary awards of national level are given from Ministry of Culture of the country through Sahitya Academy. Recently, a separate directorate has been announced for Bodo and other tribal languages of Assam in the state of Assam. And as per a source, reliable source, Bodo as a medium of instruction is going to be implemented in West Bengal also. So let me conclude here. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brahma, for this insightful on language, because this is again a very, very important part when we are talking about intercultural exchanges. Now we would have a short discussion which would be led by Devasri. After the discussion, we would throw all the presentations open for questions. Over to you, Devasri.
Yes, thank you, Sucharita. I think what we could do actually is that, because I realize we have a little paucity of time, so what I can do is there are certain things that have come up from these presentations. Thank you very much to all the professors for the wonderful presentations. I think we learned a lot through these processes, and it has made me a little bit curious about certain things, and I wanted to know a couple of things if you could speak on at some point with the other questions that come up. Is one is of course how has I mean some of you, Professor Baswatari and others, spoke about 1952 being an important period in terms of modern Bodo literature, but what's also interesting over here is this kind of correlates with the language movement in Assam at that point of time. And I was wondering if you could speak about agency of Boro presence, linguistic presence within Greater Assam and with other indigenous communities at that point as a language and as a process of resilience. What's also important, I think, is one of the most important is I was intrigued by the use by the discussion with Indira Goswami because it I mean, I'm a little surprised. I mean, I understand, but I'm still surprised, and I was curious. Let's put it. Is that how is Indira Goswami received as a person who belongs to a completely non-Boro heritage and who writes about this? And I was wondering if there are politics of appropriation of Boro culture that emerged during that point during the publication. It's one of her final works, of course. And one wants to know a little more about how is she received, if there are difficulties in receiving her texts within the context of oral literature today. I mean, there has been a journey since her passing on, and I was wondering if you could talk about that a little more. And of course, finally, this whole idea of Batho religion, and given the multiplicities and complexities with respect to the idea of religion right now, I was wondering how does Bathoism function within Boroland right now? How does it function as a process of identity? How is it seen and how is it received within the rest of India? I mean, we spoke about colonial representation, so I was wondering if there has been a journey away from that colonial representation, if at all, or if there has been once again, an appropriation of within mainstream religions, which has, I think, always been a problem with respect to indigeneity. So these were things that I was thinking about, and it would be really helpful if you talk about these things at some point. We could talk about it now, or we could perhaps we also take up questions and they could be addressed together in order to save time. Would that make sense?
I think that actually is what we need to do.
Yeah, so I mean, because it would also kind of talk about, so if we could touch upon these issues and if we have questions also from the audience, if there are any.
Okay, so I had a few questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first question was, I think will mostly be of interest to Professor Olindra Brahmo because I guess Vishnu Prasad Rabha, he at a point of time he claimed that there is a script which Bodo rulers used at the ancient time, which he called as a Devdahi script, and there were a few inscriptions found in at ruins in at Dimapur. So regarding this Devdahi script, so there was not much found, not much written about it after that. But so yeah, so like if you can shed a little bit light about this script, or like what kind of research, if anybody followed through along with it, or means what happened with it exactly.
Yeah.
And then
Hello.
Yeah.
Can I reply now? Give the answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So actually, yeah, exactly. Vishnu Prasad Rava claimed that one script called Devdai was there to write the Boro language, and some scriptures are found in Rajabari, Dimapur, but as from another source, we know that the script is still there in some areas in Kokrajhar district, present Kokrajhar district, but it is used by some people, and they are practicing the script as a religious script only, and we cannot go inside uh, them to work on it, to know about the script, to learn the script without becoming a member of their religious community. So it is there, still there. So some people are trying to work on it. Even I am also trying to work on it. But being here in Mysore, actually I could not go there. So, but the other thing is that if we have to work on that script, we have to become part of their community, religious community. So that much I know right now. And even I have the script with me. Uh, I I can give you if you want. Yeah, but I cannot pronounce the letters actually. Which one is representing what sound like that?
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
And okay, so I have a second question also. Uh, this one is to Professor Anil Bodo, sir. So when we are speaking about cultures and Bodo traditions and its practices, so has there been divergence from the kind of practices that are followed within the Bodo community in Assam and the Bodo community that has migrated or spread to say northern Bengal and even to Nepal? And so so has there been a maintenance or similarity, or has there been a lot of changes and divergence? Yeah, so that is my question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. You asked about the Bodo culture and language in North Bengal and in Nepal. The Bodos in Nepal are known as Mechi or Meche, and the Bodos in North Bengal are known as Mets. But their language is same, Bodo, and their culture is the same. But whatever differences there is just this dialectical and dialectical difference because of this geographical location, because of their contact with the local people in North Bengal or in this Japa district of Nepal. They still follow this Bodo religion. They still speak the Bodo language. In last year only, we had a conference there where the Nepali Bodos, the Bodos of Nepal, they took a strong resolution to start introduce the Bodo language in the schools. And in North Bengal also, it's the same process is going on. There is no cultural difference. The only difference you can see is this dialectical variation, as you see in all the languages.
Thank you so much, sir.
And about the other questions that was related to Batoism, we have complete transformation in Bodo religion. I mentioned one that 1992, it was the date when this Bodo religious union was formed, and after that, a strong reformation, strong reformation measures had taken place. And before this, it was Gurudev Kalicharan Brahma, who in the first decade or second decade of the last century, he introduced strong reform measures to completely stop this all superstitions among the Bodos. Because of the prevalence of the superstitions in the Bodo society, the Bodo people were neglected. Then the Bodo people was called by other people, the Aryan people, the so-called Aryan as macho. mulatto and Katharis and all the other pejorative terms were used. And that is why Gurudev Kalicharan Brahma felt that we must reform the Bodo society by giving away with the all practices, the drinking habits, the all type of rituals, all type of Karai Puja with sacrifice and all these, the habit of brewing, the habit of making rice beer, offering rice beer, drinking rice beer, and the habit and the culture of this rearing pig and other animals. So this thing started from the time of Gurudev Kalicharan Brahma, and now after 1990s, we see strong reform movements, reform measures undertaken by the Batu leaders, the leaders of the Batu religious unions. At one point of time, there was no temple-like structure for this Batu religion. Now you see big temples coming up. Now you see religious prayers, regular religious prayers coming up on Tuesday and certain dates, and some strict regulations have coming up, codes have coming up, some secret books have come up, religious books have come up. These religious prayer songs called Batu Aros have come up. So many new things have come up. So you see a kind of a renaissance, as in renaissance among the Bodos in religion. As you see these ethnic movements going on, and parallelly this religious movements in the name of Batuism. So these things are coming up.
Right. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Can I respond as well?
Yes, please, Professor.
Yeah. Devashri, we're talking about the reception of Indira Goswami. You know, how Indira Goswami comes into reference, like since I have talked about this particular novel. All right. Interestingly, you know, when she took up to write this novel, Tengpakri Tahsilar Tamor Torwal in 2009, actually it was the, you know, the Bodo Sahitya Sabha that under its aegis in 2005 at Bodoland Guest House, you know, it organized a workshop to facilitate Goswami in her research on this, you know, in writing this book. Okay, so I mean, you're saying like the tension, maybe again her role, okay, in the politics of it all. All right, like I have not read anywhere, you know, like, and because you know, she was also talking, she was also a mediator so far as the alphas were concerned. All right, but I don't know whether so far as the Bodo thing was concerned, but nevertheless, you know, like in the manner in which she wrote, I suppose, you know, like because she is one of the major voices, you know, so far as Assamese writing or literature is concerned. So maybe, you know, like the Bodo intelligentsia also thought maybe, you know, like when she comes up to write about, you know, a forgotten Bodo legend, you know, so they kind of, you know, cooperated with her. And you know, from what I see, you know, the reception was perhaps quite good. I don't know if Anil Bodo sir and all, they know, you know, if the reception was otherwise, okay? But as I had mentioned in the course of my paper, you know, like she writes it to her purpose, all right? How she uses the legend and how Vidyasagar Narjari uses it are two different ways, you know, because again, you know, the reception, the readership is again important, you know, in this context. That responds to, you know, what you were asking. All right. And I think another point that you talked about was, I think something to do with colonial representation, right? It continues, you know, actually, even I kind of question that, you know, I agree with you. I keep interrogating them in most of the papers that I read, you know, it's like that happens from our discipline, right? So like, I mean, we still, you know, talk about, when we start talking about Bodo history, all right? You know, we start talking about Sidney Endell, about Brian Hodgson, okay? And all these people, we still continue to, you know, begin a history from that point in time. But I have written certain papers where I have started interrogating, you know, their perceptions, you know. I mean, perhaps it's time, you know, that maybe we move on from there. You know, I feel that. Yeah.
If I may intervene, Devasri, I was wondering. I mean, could any of you just comment a little bit on the dissemination of contemporary Bodo literature within mainstream, the field of mainstream in literary studies in India? Could any of you comment a bit on that?
Yes, it would tie up with a
And
question by
also,
one of our young audience, Sucheta,
and also how it is being received.
Yes, it would. I mean, it would be very helpful because it ties up with a question from one of our young audience members, who Ankit Gandhi Das, who asked us about short story literature. So, if you
I'd
could,
like,
Honorable Bodo
yeah,
will be the right person.
yes,
Yeah.
Professor Bodo.
I would be like to respond to this. Yeah, how it is received in the mainstream Indian literary scenario. Our poets and writers are now taking part in the All India literary programs, literary festivals, reading programs. But the problem is the lack of good translations, because maybe 10 years back, maybe 15 years back, the same problem was there in Assamese writing also. But nowadays, lots of Assamese writings have been translated into English. But still, we don't have good translators. Because of this, some translations are there, maybe translated into some other languages like Nepali, Bangla, then Hindi and other languages, but the number is very few. So in order to solve these problems, we need to create a team of good translators or open translation centers in the universities, different universities here or outside. So this is an important thing to be noted.
I
And
think
some, journals. There is lack of journals also, translation journals, lack of translation journals where we are not represented.
I think I quite agree to what Professor Anil Bodo has said, because the lack of translations, so whatever writing is happening is limited to the group itself. So when it is limited to the group, then obviously, like the visibility is less. So that is a problem, I think. And to find its way into the syllabi in different parts, translation has to happen.
Right. I think that's very important. It's also something that, I mean, one was talking about religion and one was talking about missionaries and other aspects, and I was wondering of the relationship with other communities in Assam during this period, or in Assam in particular, relationship with other indigenous communities and commonalities. If you could kind of speak a little bit about that with us, especially with respect to the Bodo community. If anybody could respond. And meanwhile, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about indigenous representation, so I'm curious to know about the indigenous representation with respect to indigenous solidarity within Assam, if anybody could talk about that, please.
Yeah, about this relations between different ethnic groups, or that the Bodo people, yeah, they are in different types of relations with other communities, maybe really some other intercultural relations, some religious context with other religions also. Many of our people have accepted this new Vaishnava religion. Some have accepted this different cults of Hinduism through these different ways, and a sizable percentage of Bodo population, maybe 20 to 25%, they have also accepted Christianity. So in this way, they are connected to different communities, different groups of people. And linguistically, they're multilinguals, not only bilinguals, they're multilinguals. In Lower Assam, they can speak Bangla in Upper Assam districts, in Middle Assam districts, they can speak Assamese very well. And they can mix up with, suppose Nepali, they are living freely, they can mix freely with Nepali and other sections of the people. Then in some area there are Adivasi people. So these inter-ethnic relations are very much there. Inter-ethnic social relations and solidarities, these things are very much there. But sometimes of course, some kind of ethnic conflicts may stand in the way of this kind of solidarity. Otherwise, there are good relations with people from other communities, people from other religious sections also, religious groups also.
Thank you.
I think, ma'am, I can add something to your question, or another question. Certain similarities, I think we can see it culturally. Like even if we look at one, obviously is the language. There are certain language affinities that we share with other even if we hear the language of Garo, or even in Tripura or Kokborok, and
The Kokboros, yeah.
yeah,
Linguistically, we are very close to the when the Tripuri people speak, we can understand almost 60%, 70%. And the Tiwa people, Tiwa, and there's Garo and the Raba also. But Dimasa and Tripuri language is more closer to the Bodo language. Other than Garo and Raba, Dimasa, Tiwa, and Tripuri, these three are very close.
And
Technically, linguistically, and racially.
And in addition to that, there is a coordination committee of Sahitya Sabha tribal community in Assam, such as Bodo Sahitya Sabha for Bodo community, Garo Sahitya Sabha for Garo people, and is Sonwal Sahitya Sabha for Sonwal people. There's a coordination committee of all these Sahitya Sabhas of tribal people of Assam, and they are jointly doing some this sort of unification amongst the people in Assam.
And actually, I think this language, as much as it is similar, but I think language itself is a barrier, because not much can be understood between the communities. And I think not just as in terms of translation, not just being translated to Indian language, other Indian languages or English, but also translated into as in other Northeast Indian tribal languages. Because I think even the literature which is written by Bodo, and if a literature which is written by Garo, by the Garo Sahitya Sabha, is again limited within them, even though they are living in such close vicinity to each other, but still they are literature. I guess if we read each other's literatures, we'll see that there will be a lot of similarities in folk tales and yeah, there's bound to be similarities in folk tales, and even in. But I think is that the literature is, as much as we cannot, even as much as the other states in India cannot understand our literature, I guess even within Northeast itself, other tribals cannot understand our literature, as we cannot read their literatures, because there is a barrier in that itself. So even inter-tribal community translations can, I think, be something to give a thought of.
Right. Jadavpur, are there any more questions that come in?
Yes.
Are there any more questions forthcoming from any of the speakers?
No, not from me. Not from
Are
me.
any of the
But if anybody else has
anything?
any further questions, it has been a very, very enriching session, I must say.
Absolutely. It's been really wonderful.
So,
Very wonderful.
any further questions? Otherwise, we can just.
Yeah. We can.
It's 28. Yes.
We've overshot the
I
time
don't think
anyway.
there are any.
Yes.
Yes.
We have an
Okay,
upcoming
so there was
students
would you
webinar.
mind? Yeah.
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 Yeah. Suchita, you could call us, please.
Debasri, would you do the honors?
Okay. No, thank you very much, everyone. It was really nice to have you all here. It was wonderful, in fact, to have all of you here. And we are hoping that we can continue this conversation because we plan a series of webinars on indigeneity. So Professor Bodo, Professor Brahma, Professor Daimari, Professor Vasuvatari, thank you so much for being with us today. On behalf of CCS, we're very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for having us.
Even I am thanking you,
Thank you.
all of you
Thank you.
from the
And
core of
Thank you
my
so
heart.
much.
yes, and we are very grateful to Milan for making this possible. Milan is also our final year student in Canadian Studies, and so this was done at a very short time. So thank you for doing this at such short notice. So thank you so much for being here, and we hope we can see you again soon. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. It's been a wonderful evening. Thank you so very much. We shall try to put up this link on YouTube soon and we'll let you know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.